Imagine this. A national airline faces a fatal incident. Families are grieving, a country is shaken, the world is watching, and in the most critical moment, the moment where leadership must rise, the CEO steps forward, only to deliver a message that misses the mark so badly it becomes part of the crisis itself. That's exactly what happened with Air Canada. After a tragic event that resulted in fatalities, the CEO of Air Canada addressed the nation, but failed to speak in one of Canada's two official languages. Not because he chose not to, but because he never learned it. And in a country where 22% of the population speaks French as a first language, this wasn't just a communications gap, it was a leadership failure. Hello, everyone. I'm Jerome Ryan, joined by Mike Janko, and this is Impact Analysis. This video is sponsored, so please stay tuned at the end where you'll hear directly from Mike about why he wrote his Amazon #1 best-selling book, Operational Excellence, and how you too can apply the lessons he's learned from building, leading, and managing programs for global organizations over the past 3 decades. With that, I turn it over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Jerome, and hello, everyone. Today, we're talking about something far more important than operations or logistics. It's leadership under pressure and how one mistake can turn a tragedy into a reputational crisis. When you have national grief, leaders don't just represent their organizations. They represent trust, competence, care. When they get it wrong, the consequences spread fast. Here's the sequence of what happened. So, Air Canada experienced a tragic incident with a regional jet colliding with a fire truck at New York's LaGuardia Airport, resulting in fatalities. Canada expected and deserved a clear, compassionate, bilingual response from the airline's top leader. Instead, Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau delivered a statement only in English, despite Canada officially being bilingual and Quebec representing a massive portion of the airline's customer base. Immediate backlash, national media criticism, public outrage all throughout Quebec. Political leaders were calling the response unacceptable, and social media called it a lack of compassion. Here's the key point. It wasn't just a language issue. It was a signal that the leader was unprepared, unsupported, and disconnected from the people that he serves.
And this is where leadership resilience comes into play, because in a crisis, you don't get multiple attempts. You get that one moment, one message, one chance to show the world who you are. Air Canada's CEO didn't just miss the mark, he revealed a deeper organizational weakness. No one prepared him, no one guided him, no one protected the brand. And that's a failure of leadership systems, not just the leader.
So let's talk about the ripple effects, Jerome. When a leader miscommunicates during a tragedy, you have human impact, families feel unseen, the community feels disrespected, trust is eroding immediately. You have reputational impact. There's a study that shows 63% of consumers lose trust in a company after a poor crisis response. Sometimes it's impossible to rebuild. On the operational impact, airlines rely heavily on public confidence. So a single leadership misstep can affect bookings, loyalty programs, government relations, labor relations, and media messages. Also, that national identity impact. In Canada, language isn't just communications, it's their culture. If you don't speak French in a national crisis, it's like failing to speak to the country itself.
Yeah, Mike, and here's the bigger issue. In a world where crises spread instantly, leaders must be prepared to communicate across languages, cultures, platforms, emotions, and stakeholder groups, because the public doesn't just judge leaders on intentions, they judge them on impact. So let's talk a little bit about the cascading effects now. The first failure was the message. The second failure was what it revealed.
Exactly, Jerome. There's deeper structural issues here. First, lack of crisis communications preparedness. No bilingual statement, wasn't ready. There was no communication advisor stepping in. They had no scenario planning. There was also a leadership skill gap. When you have a CEO who's never learned one of the country's official languages, despite leading the airline, there were some blind spots in the organization where no one was asking, is this message appropriate for our entire country? And then being culturally disconnected. If a leader doesn't reflect the people they serve, you don't have that trust. Here's a statistic that really matters. More than 70% of corporate crises escalate because of poor communications, not the original event.
And that's the lesson. Crises don't just test operations, they test leadership, cultures, and organizational resilience. So now let's transition to talk about what the executive takeaways are.
Here's the bottom line, Jerome. You only get one chance to lead in a crisis. If your leader fails, the consequences are human, reputational, and operational. Here's a few leadership lessons. Prepare your leaders before the crisis. Have media training, scenario rehearsals, bilingually or culturally aligned messages. Make sure your protocols and acknowledge people first. And build a crisis communication system, not just a statement. Leaders need to know that they can go off the script with empathy, clarity, cultural awareness, and they may need support from advisors, translators, cultural intelligence, get some real-time feedback, and have some pre-approved messaging as well. And don't forget that resilience is human. Operational resilience is important, but leadership resilience is what public sees first. In a crisis, people don't care. They don't initially care and look at your supply chain. They look at your leader. Then they decide whether they're going to trust you in seconds.
And here's the strategic insight. Resilient organizations don't just prepare their systems, they prepare their leaders. That means practicing crisis communications, building cultural fluency, anticipating public reaction, and ensuring leaders can speak to everyone they serve. Because when tragedy strikes, leadership isn't optional, it's the whole game.
And that's our message today. If a single communication misstep can damage national trust, imagine what happens where leaders are unprepared for a real crisis. So that's why resilience isn't just operational. It's human, reputational, and leadership driven.
Please share this episode, subscribe, and support our impact analysis community. Mike, always great to be here with you. And remember, you can manage risk now or its consequences later.
Hi, I'm Mike Janko, author of Excellence in Operational Resilience and co-host of the new YouTube channel, Impact Analysis. I wrote this book so you can learn of my journey of both personal and operational resilience. During my career as Goodyear's Director of Global Business Continuity and various leadership roles at both Nestle and Stouffer Hotels, we successfully managed through nearly 4,000 significant events and crises throughout the U.S., Latin America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. A key takeaway during all those events was our teams performed the best when they were led by resilient leaders. My personal resilience is based on being an athlete, martial artist, and setting 2 world sit-up records. And a resilient leader does not allow themselves or their teams to fail. Operational resilience is not just about responding to crises. It's about leading teams to adapt, adjust, learn, and succeed through all types of events. If your organization wants to improve, I suggest you get my book, Excellence in Operational Resilience. After all, the only thing harder than being resilient is explaining why you aren't.